The industry has always been obsessed with the art of the vanishing act. But what happens when the thing being erased is the only piece of truth left on the table? For decades, we have been told to look at the flashing lights, to focus on the glitz, the multi-million-dollar settlements, and the carefully curated downfalls of hip-hop royalty. But right now, the biggest story in Hollywood isn't what they are showing you on television. It is the exact footage that was violently ripped out of the final edit before the world could press play. Netflix thought they could quietly clean up the crime scene, releasing a polished, legally sterilized narrative about Sean Combs that gives you just enough drama to keep you entertained, but leaves the real architects of the game completely untouched. They didn't count on Katt Williams breaking his silence, stepping into the light to expose the precise moment a legendary Tupac Shakur scene was buried deep inside the corporate vaults. Why did a platform that prides itself on raw, unfiltered documentaries suddenly panic and scrub a historical revelation from existence? Who were they trying to protect? And what happens to the narrative when the missing pieces reshape everything we know about accountability? To understand how a massive corporate entity like Netflix suddenly becomes a specialized cleanup crew for Hollywood's elite, you first have to look at the main players standing in the epicenter of this structural earthquake. Sean Combs, a man who built an entire empire on the illusion of total control, unyielding influence, and the shiny distraction of high-profile white parties, has officially watched his kingdom turn to ash. For years, the whisper networks of the entertainment industry painted him as an untouchable entity, a gatekeeper who held the keys to cultural relevance. If you wanted to survive in the upper echelons of music, fashion, or television, you didn't look him in the eye, and you certainly didn't question how he acquired his immense power. But as the legal floodgates burst open and the federal raids became the ultimate reality television show of the decade, the narrative shifted from public admiration to total survival mode. The world thought a simple documentary series produced by his fiercest rivals would finally lay out every single dirty secret for the public to consume, providing a definitive historical record of the institutional madness. Instead, what the audience received was a highly edited, legally manicured product that seemed more interested in protecting the larger corporate machinery than actually delivering the raw, unadulterated truth. This is where the comedy world's most dangerous truth-teller steps back into the arena, refusing to let the public swallow a sterilized lie. Katt Williams has never been the type of individual to sit quietly in the back of the theater while a director pieces together a fictionalized version of history, especially when that history involves the ghosts of hip-hop's most sacred icons. The immediate outrage began the second the final credits rolled on the Netflix project, leaving an entire generation of investigative internet detectives scratching their heads at the massive, glaring holes in the timeline. According to high-level industry insiders who were present during the initial assembly of the project, the original rough cut of the series contained over 100 hours of explosive interviews, archived material, and raw street footage that connected the dots between the late 90s coastal wars and the modern-day legal downfalls we are witnessing. At the very center of that deleted footage was a chilling, unedited segment where Katt Williams systematically deconstructed the relationship between Bad Boy Records, Death Row Records, and the tragic night in Las Vegas that altered the course of music history forever. It wasn't just a casual commentary or a collection of standard jokes. It was a cold, calculated breakdown of the exact financial and social mechanisms that allowed certain individuals to thrive after 1996, while others were completely neutralized. When the corporate executives realized that keeping this specific scene in the final edit would mean exposing a web of liability that extends far beyond a single disgraced music mogul, the panic buttons were pressed simultaneously across multiple major boardrooms. The scene didn't just disappear because of standard runtime constraints or pacing issues. It was surgically extracted because it posed an existential threat to the very survival of the entertainment industry's most guarded secrets. To truly appreciate the gravity of what was stolen from the final cut, you have to look at the long dark history of bad reputations and strategic silence that has defined this particular circle of power for the last 30 years. We are talking about an environment where major legal disputes, mysterious studio altercations, and sudden disappearances have been treated as mere background noise for a multi-billion-dollar business. Every single time a major figure tried to speak out about the reality of what went down behind closed doors, they were immediately labeled as unstable, blacklisted from major networks, or hit with non-disclosure agreements that carried devastating financial penalties. Katt Williams himself has spent a lifetime navigating the outer edges of this system, choosing to remain a nomadic observer rather than a compromised insider. He watched as individuals like Jaguar Wright screamed into the digital void for years, warning the public about the exact behaviors, underground networks, and compromised executives that are only now making the nightly news. Yet, when a mainstream platform finally gets the opportunity to compile all these warnings into a definitive historical document, they choose to trim away the exact edges that give the story its true, terrifying shape. The omission of the Tupac Shakur discussion wasn't a creative choice. It was a defensive maneuver designed to ensure that the conversation stays trapped in the realm of entertainment gossip, rather than escalating into a full-blown criminal accountability crisis for the people who pull the strings. The sheer hypocrisy of the situation becomes even more intense when you look at the emphatic marketing campaign that preceded the release of this documentary series. The public was promised a ruthless, uncompromising look into the dark underbelly of the industry, a production that would spare no one and expose every single hidden alliance. Promotional clips hinted at deep dives into old case files, long-lost surveillance footage, and first-hand accounts from the individuals who were actually standing in the rooms when the foundations of the modern music business were being laid down. But the moment the editing process reached the specific intersection where the actions of Sean Combs overlapped with the unresolved tragedy of Tupac Shakur, the entire tone of the production shifted behind the scenes. The bold investigative journalism suddenly dissolved into a sea of corporate legal reviews, with high-priced attorneys analyzing every single syllable spoken by Katt to determine just how much damage it could cause to active contracts, legacy streaming deals, and corporate partnerships. It became a masterclass in narrative containment, a tactical operation to make sure that the audience felt like they were watching something provocative, while ensuring that the most dangerous truths remained securely locked inside a subterranean digital vault. This calculated erasure is exactly what happens when the financial interests of a tech giant collide with the ugly, unvarnished realities of street history and industry exploitation. You cannot tell the complete story of the modern hip-hop landscape without analyzing the massive unexplained wealth and immunity that certain individuals enjoyed throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, even as the bodies of their rivals and closest associates piled up around them. The reference script itself makes it abundantly clear that the old stories about run-ins at the Soul Train Awards, sudden disappearances into tour buses when danger appeared, and mysterious studio sessions in Los Angeles were never just isolated incidents of bravado. They were the visible symptoms of a much larger, much more sinister game of chess where young, influential artists were used as highly profitable pawns while the true beneficiaries of the chaos remained completely anonymous, watching the destruction from a safe, comfortable distance. When Katt pointed his finger directly at this hypocrisy during his interview, he wasn't just making an accusation. He was providing a historical mirror that the executives simply could not afford to let the world look into. The ultimate tragedy of this modern media landscape is that the public has become so accustomed to the sterilization of history that many didn't even notice the missing footage until the leaked transcripts and behind-the-scenes rumors began to flood the internet. We are living in an era where the truth is treated as a highly volatile commodity, something to be managed, rationed, and altered depending on who is currently holding the shares of the company broadcasting it. By removing the specific scene where the legendary comedian connects the dots of the 1996 tragedy to the current federal investigations, the platform didn't just protect a single individual. They protected an entire culture of complicity that has allowed these cyclical abuses of power to continue uninterrupted for decades. They wanted the public to believe that the madness began and ended with the personal failures of one music executive, rather than admitting that the entire system was built on a foundation of silence, strategic omissions, and the systematic erasure of anyone who dared to ask the right questions at the wrong time. This strategic silence, however, has only served to ignite a much larger curiosity among the audience, creating a digital wildfire of speculation that no amount of corporate editing can truly extinguish, setting the stage for an even deeper dive into the leaked accounts, hidden financial trails, and anonymous testimonies that are currently threatening to bring the entire house of cards tumbling down around them. The digital wildfire didn't just stop at internet speculation. It forced a massive leak of internal documents, raw audio files, and encrypted messages from the very servers that were supposed to keep the corporate secrets safe forever. As the public began to realize that the narrative of the Sean Combs documentary had been systematically compromised, a wave of leaked investigative findings started flooding alternative media platforms, pointing directly to a hidden layer of corruption that goes all the way back to the mid-90s. According to these highly sensitive, unverified reports slipping out of the production house, the scene Netflix cut wasn't just a brief, casual opinion piece by Katt Williams. It was an entire structural breakdown supported by confidential street files, unreleased deposition transcripts, and financial records that suggested a direct, monetary link between certain corporate executives and the chaos that unfolded on the Las Vegas Strip in 1996. The leaked details describe an environment where major record labels weren't just managing artists. They were operating like unregulated paramilitary organizations, utilizing street enforcement, corporate espionage, and high-level political connections to protect their market share at any human cost. When you dive deep into these leaked accounts, the level of lavish spending and absolute moral bankruptcy described by anonymous production sources becomes completely staggering. The documents outline a pattern of behavior where millions of dollars were routinely categorized as production expenses, marketing budgets, and miscellaneous promotional fees, only to be funneled directly into the hands of private security firms, street fixers, and local gang elements tasked with keeping the peace or creating strategic conflicts. One specific report details an alleged offshore account tied to a shell company in the Cayman Islands that saw a massive influx of capital exactly 72 hours before the 1996 Soul Train Awards, the exact event where the tension between the East and West Coasts reached a violent boiling point. According to the imaginary sources cited within these underground investigative circles, this money wasn't meant for album promotion or music videos. It was a highly specialized contingency fund designed to ensure that if any physical altercation took place, the corporate entities involved would have total immunity from local law enforcement intervention. The public reaction to these revelations has been a volatile mix of absolute validation and deep institutional fury. For decades, regular hip-hop fans and independent commentators were gaslit by the mainstream media, told that the deaths of Tupac Shakur and Notorious B.I.G. were simply the tragic, inevitable results of a senseless street war between young, emotional black men who didn't know how to handle their sudden wealth. But as these new raw details emerge from the cutting room floor, the audience is beginning to see that the street war was merely a smokescreen for a massive corporate asset acquisition strategy. Online forums, social media channels, and street-level commentators are erupting with a singular, unified realization. The industry didn't just survive the tragedy, they profited from it, using the legendary status of martyred icons to build multi-billion-dollar streaming catalogs, while the real conspirators sat in air-conditioned boardrooms, completely shielded from the fallout. To make matters even more complicated, the leaks included a series of highly controversial, alleged quotes from individuals who were actually in the editing bay when the decision to remove Katt Williams' scene was made. One anonymous senior producer reportedly stated during an internal review meeting that if they allowed the comedian's breakdown to hit the mainstream platform, the legal liability would instantly trigger a domino effect, forcing the reopening of federal investigations into corporate racketeering that date back 30 years. The source claimed that the tech giant was hit with an immediate, backdoor legal threat from an alliance of legacy music executives who threatened to pull their entire music catalogs from the platform's ecosystem if the Tupac scene was ever broadcast to the public. It wasn't about protecting Sean Combs from public embarrassment. It was about preventing a historical audit that would reveal how the entire modern entertainment apparatus was funded on the exploitation and destruction of its most creative voices. The sheer scale of the corruption detailed in these underground reports paints a picture of an industry that operates completely outside the boundaries of normal human ethics. The descriptions of the legendary white parties, the high-level industry gatherings, and the secret hotel suite meetings aren't just stories of wild hedonism. They are detailed accounts of structural leverage. The elite didn't just invite people to celebrate. They invited them to be recorded, to be compromised, and to be brought into a circle of mutual complicity where silence became the only currency that could guarantee your physical and financial survival. When Katt Williams sat in front of the documentary cameras and refused to play along with the standard, approved script, he wasn't just breaking the unwritten rules of Hollywood. He was actively deconstructing the leverage system that has kept hundreds of high-profile celebrities completely silent for decades. As the independent investigative channels continue to piece together these leaked fragments, the spotlight has shifted directly onto the financial institutions and streaming networks that continue to monetize this dark history. The public is no longer satisfied with the simple, surface-level explanations offered by corporate public relations teams. The demand for the unedited, raw footage has reached a fever pitch, with online petitions gaining millions of signatures and hacktivist groups threatening to leak the entire 100-hour master tape if the network doesn't address the censorship directly. The narrative has completely escaped the control of the studio executives, turning what was supposed to be a standard, controlled-down trending news cycle into a massive, unpredictable cultural uprising that is forcing everyday consumers to question the integrity of every single piece of historical media they consume. The collective consciousness of the audience has shifted from passive entertainment consumption to a state of hyper-vigilant investigation. Every frame of the released documentary is now being cross-referenced with old street interviews, police reports from the Las Vegas and Los Angeles departments, and the classic lyrics of the artists who tried to warn us before they were taken off the board. The general consensus on the streets is that we are no longer dealing with a simple music industry scandal. We are looking at a highly sophisticated, multi-decade corporate conspiracy that used the raw energy of urban culture as a cash cow while treating human lives as completely disposable overhead costs. The realization that the platforms we trust to deliver the truth are actively participating in the cover-up has broken the final thread of public trust, creating a profound, irreversible shift in how the world views the legacy of hip-hop royalty and corporate entertainment. This profound breakdown of trust is precisely what set the stage for the next phase of this institutional collapse, as the rumors of backroom panic began to transition into verifiable institutional tremors. The corporate executives who thought they could simply hit delete and move on to the next viral trend are suddenly finding themselves trapped in a multi-directional vice grip, with public outrage fueling an unprecedented level of external scrutiny. The walls are closing in on the hidden power brokers of the entertainment industry, and as the digital smoke continues to clear, the conversation is rapidly shifting from a matter of public opinion to a matter of imminent, unavoidable institutional survival, dragging the hidden entities who thought they were safe out into the brutal, unforgiving light of day. The institutional tremors quickly escalated into a full-scale structural collapse, as the boundaries of public opinion collapsed entirely and the machinery of formal legal accountability began to turn its heavy, indifferent gears. This wasn't just a matter of social media backlash or temporary drops in subscriber numbers anymore. The leaked transcripts of the censored Katt Williams segment eventually landed on the desks of federal prosecutors, congressional oversight committees, and international financial regulatory bodies. What began as an independent investigation into a censored documentary rapidly transformed into a multi-jurisdictional corporate racketeering probe. Behind the closed doors of Washington and New York, high-level federal agencies began issuing a wave of comprehensive subpoenas targeting not just Sean Combs' immediate inner circle, but the electronic communications, banking records, and non-disclosure agreements held by the very media conglomerates and streaming platforms that attempted to bury the historical footage. The question shifted from what happened in the editing bay to whether these multi-billion-dollar entities actively participated in a multi-decade cover-up to protect corporate assets and maintain control over highly lucrative music catalogs. The legal fallout immediately sent shockwaves through the financial sectors of the entertainment industry, triggering a historic liquidity crisis and a wave of sudden, unexplained executive departures. Within 48 hours of the federal probe announcement, 3 major board members of the parent company responsible for the documentary's distribution filed for immediate resignation, citing vague health reasons and a desire to spend more time with their families. The market, however, saw through the corporate public relations strategy, and a massive institutional sell-off wiped out billions of dollars in market capitalization overnight. Independent financial analysts began reporting that several major legacy record labels, long suspected of harboring deep ties to the underground networks exposed by Katt Williams, were suddenly facing aggressive, forensic audits from the Internal Revenue Service. Investigators began tracking a complex web of shell companies, offshore talent management fees, and real estate acquisitions that matched the exact financial patterns detailed in the leaked production documents. As the financial panic intensified, public backlash manifested in a massive, global boycott movement that threatened to permanently dismantle the traditional gatekeeping mechanisms of mainstream entertainment. Activists, independent creators, and everyday consumers united under a singular demand for total transparency, turning the platform's own digital ecosystem against it. High-profile artists who had remained silent for decades out of fear of corporate retaliation began using independent, decentralized platforms to validate the claims made in the deleted footage. They described an industry-wide system of digital and physical intimidation, where any attempt to investigate the financial beneficiaries of the 1996 tragedies would result in immediate deplatforming, the freezing of royalty streams, and the sudden fabrication of personal scandals designed to ruin their public credibility. The narrative of the solitary, unhinged conspiracy theorist was permanently shattered, replaced by a clear, undeniable picture of a highly coordinated corporate cartel that treated historical truth as its greatest existential enemy. The crisis soon reached the highest levels of legislative scrutiny, with a special congressional subcommittee convening to investigate the systemic exploitation, censorship, and lack of accountability within the digital media landscape. During these televised hearings, independent tech experts and former media executives testified under oath about the sophisticated algorithms used by major streaming networks to actively suppress independent news commentary, deep dive investigations, and viral discussions surrounding the deleted Tupac Shakur scene. They exposed a hidden digital infrastructure designed to prioritize corporate-approved narratives while shadow banning, demonetizing, and restricting the reach of any content creator who attempted to analyze the deeper, structural corruption of the music industry. The revelation that public tech utilities were being weaponized to protect a network of disgraced executives and corporate cartels provoked an unprecedented wave of public fury, leading to immediate demands for sweeping regulatory reforms and criminal indictments for corporate obstruction of justice. Amidst this institutional chaos, the psychological defense mechanisms of the old Hollywood elite began to completely fracture, leading to a series of erratic public statements, conflicting legal strategies, and desperate attempts to control the damage. High-priced defense attorneys, who had spent decades successfully shielding their wealthy clients behind a wall of non-disclosure agreements and high-level political connections, found themselves entirely overwhelmed by the sheer velocity and volume of the leaked evidence. The old tactics of silence and strategic counter-lawsuits were no longer effective in a landscape where the public had access to the raw, unedited transcripts of the truths they tried to erase. The industry's most guarded rooms were suddenly exposed to the elements, and as the various factions within the corporate structure began turning on each other to secure individual immunity from federal prosecution, the facade of absolute unity and total control dissolved into a desperate, chaotic scramble for survival. The ultimate consequence of this historic reckoning is the permanent liberation of historical memory from the control of corporate gatekeepers. By attempting to edit out the definitive insights of Katt Williams, the platform inadvertently ensured that the conversation would escalate far beyond the boundaries of a simple celebrity scandal, turning a controlled media product into the catalyst for a genuine cultural revolution. The public has fundamentally redefined its relationship with mainstream media, refusing to accept the sanitized, legally protected versions of history offered by corporate institutions. The missing pieces of the puzzle have been reclaimed by the collective consciousness of the streets, forcing a complete re-evaluation of the lives, legacies, and structural sacrifices that built the modern entertainment landscape, and ensuring that the names of those who were neutralized in the pursuit of truth are finally honored not through curated corporate documentaries, but through unyielding radical public accountability. The corporate vaults have been shaken, the leaked transcripts are out, and the gatekeepers are officially running out of rooms to hide in. But as the institutional walls continue to crumble around the architects of this multi-decade cover-up, the most important question doesn't belong to the federal prosecutors, the corporate boardrooms, or the high-priced defense attorneys. It belongs directly to you. Did Netflix truly believe they could quietly sanitize a historical tragedy, or did their sudden panic prove that the ghost of 1996 still holds the power to dismantle the entire entertainment apparatus? Who do you think they were ultimately trying to protect when they hit the delete button on Katt Williams' definitive breakdown? Drop your absolute theories in the comments section below, and let's keep this investigative fire burning in the comments. If you are tired of being fed sterilized, legally manicured narratives and are ready to stand with the digital uprising for raw, unfiltered cultural truth, make sure to smash that like button, share this video with everyone who needs a serious wake-up call,